Alright, so the time has finally come to turbo the E36. It's long overdue, and this is going to be the introduction video to a whole series going through the whole process step by step, and I'm hoping it'll serve as sort of like a basis for someone who doesn't really know that much about turbocharging anything, a complete novice that can just follow the videos and do it as I go along, and hopefully end up the end result of turboing your car. Just keep it simple and to the point, and the build's going to be cheap, which there's not really such thing as a cheap turbo build, but it's going to be basic as it can get. I'm going to be doing the tuning myself and stuff. I have a chip and everything, which I'll go through everything later on as the videos progress, but in this video I'm just going to go through everything I have, the essentials, go over what it is, what I picked up, and the price, everything like that, so anybody that's watching can go through and sort of get an idea of what you will need, this, that, the price, everything like that, which I'm just going to jump straight into the video. I'll start going over everything, just keep this thing brief, and then hopefully I can knock this video out and get straight to throwing stuff on this car. I'm really excited. So here I have everything laid out, which this is actually just like the main components. This isn't nearly everything. There's a ton of small stuff, but I'm just going to start going through, which first and foremost we'll just start with the turbo, which I have a couple here, which obviously you'll notice, but originally I was going to go with a top mount setup, which I was going to use this turbo, which is pretty large. It's a 70 mil, which I don't know if you say mil or what, but it's a 70.70 turbo. It's a T4 with a V-van fitting. It's no internal wastegate or anything, which it was just really hard to fit with the valve cover, and I'd have to run a downpipe through like underneath this, and it's real tight. So I ended up switching to a bottom mount setup, which I bought a smaller turbo for, which this is a .50, I believe. 0.50. It's a T3, T4 like hybrid turbo. So the mounting flange is a T3, which is what most manifolds are for the E36, and it's smaller, which should fit, it should spool better, and it's just easier to work with. Which, starting off, I'm going to be running very low boost, so the smaller turbo is really going to help in that aspect. It's not really going to get overloaded. There's not really any need for me to use the bigger one yet, which I'm hoping to get the car running for a while, and then eventually maybe install like head studs and switch to a top mount setup with the big turbo, but that's a ways off. Right now I'm just going to focus on getting the car boosted and safely at low PSI so it doesn't blow up. But now we'll go over the next thing. So the next thing you need, and arguably is the most important part of the build, more so than the turbo even, is the exhaust manifold, which there's a bunch of different styles. You can see I have two here. That one doesn't have a port for an external wastegate, so you'd need an internally wastegated turbo, which this one has the port. You can see here, which this is a cast manifold, which is actually pretty cheap. It's an eBay style and should work perfect. And the stainless ones, they're a bit lighter, but they tend to crack just from the heat and everything, so I would recommend a cast one. But either way, you can't really go wrong, but just know if you're going to use an externally wastegated turbo, you're going to need a port on it. Otherwise you're going to have to drill and make your own and do all this. Just buy the right manifold to start with and you'll be good to go. Which I'll go over everything in more detail in later videos, what you need, the specifics and everything, but I just want to keep this real brief because I know talking's not really that interesting, or at least not to me. So moving on, let's keep the flow going, just knock this out. Which now we'll talk about the wastegate, which attaches just here, or if you have an internally wastegated turbo, you'll have one of these, which I really wouldn't recommend. It's real tight. I don't even think one of these would clear on a bottom mount setup, which this turbo was actually an internally wastegated turbo to begin with, but I converted it. I just wanted the option. It's real easy to convert these. You just buy like a new flange here for the back, but I'm going to be using a external wastegate, which it has a spring in it at I believe 8 psi now, which I have one coming in the mail. It should get here in a day or two, which is going to be a 4 psi spring, which I'm going to run it straight off here, which you can hook up like vacuum lines and like a manual boost controller to these to control your boost, but I'm just going to go off the spring presser, which means I don't have to just run any vacuum lines or anything. I just plug it off, put it on, and it'll be good to go. Real simple, which ultimately that's what I'm going for, just a real simple setup. Just keep things easy as possible that go on with the least amount of work and will work reliably. I'm not an expert at none of this. I'm sure I'm going to go through the whole process, make a few mistakes here and there, but it's going to be a learning process, which hopefully my mistakes will help all of you learn so you do not make the same mistakes. But that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to keep this thing simple as can be, just as little work as possible, but we'll move on. And the rest of the stuff's not as important, which I'll go through quickly, but we'll just try and wrap things up. So the rest of the key components that you're going to need is a turbo drain, which is just a drain set off eBay, which it actually came with the stainless line, which is right here, which I'm not going to be using. I'm going to be using this, which is actually transmission cooler line, which fits perfectly with these AN fittings, I don't know how you say them, but it should work. I got something special planned for this, which is why I'm using it, so you'll see in a later video. I'm real excited about it, which I think it'll really help people out. But that is the turbo drain, which you'll also need a feed, which I got this set off of eBay, which pretty much everything's off of eBay, but it's real cheap, it's long enough and should work, which you're gonna have to do some stuff to get a feed point off the Vanos bolt, which I'll talk about all that later. I'm not trying to get ahead here, but that's just the drain feed. There's not much to it. Now you will need a blow off valve, which this is a like HKS like sequential clone. It's just the same thing, just a knockoff really, but it'll work, it'll sound good, and it was only like $40 or so, which there's not much to it. It's a blow off valve, and it also came with this 2.5 pipe here with the like V-Van flange or whatever you call it. Not a V-Van, but you know what I'm trying to say here. But we'll move on to the next thing. All that's just the little components, which believe me, there's a ton of them when it comes to stuff like this. But now we'll talk about intercoolers, which I actually have a couple of them here. That one is an eBay one, and this one's an OBX one, which you can see that one's like the standard sort of design, which this one is an OBX one, and it's kind of weird. It has the bottom there and then an angled one here, which I'm not sure which one I'm going to use yet, just whichever one mounts the easiest and makes running the intercooler piping the simplest, which is going to be kind of hard because it's kind of cramped, and plus I got a lot of angle from the driftwork setup. But I'll figure out everything when the time comes. Now moving on, the last bit of stuff is just like all intercooler piping related. It's the piping itself, the couplers, the clamps, all of that stuff, which is all 2.5 inch, as well as the intercoolers, which the outlet on the turbo here is actually a bit smaller than the bigger one here. I believe this one's about 2 inches or so, so I'm gonna have to get like an adapter or something along those lines. And I'm also going to need an adapter to mount the piping to my MAF sensor here, which I believe is 3 inches, so I got to figure out a few little things like that, but overall it's pretty simple. It's just piping really. But that is the kit, or at least the core components of it, which obviously is a bit more complicated, and we'll find out all of that once I'm going through working on the car. But if you have any questions or anything like that about the parts, and just anything in general, feel free to ask. I'll try to reply, and others in the comment section, which I know there's going to be a bunch that are way smarter than me, know a lot more, they can help too. So hopefully we can just all sort of work together and just figure out things, help each other, and just maybe make more boosted cars in the world, which I'm going to start working on the car probably over tomorrow, and this weekend I'm going to be mounting the exhaust manifold and the turbo to start with, mocking up some things like that, which I'll be working on it very soon, so expect content out. I'm trying to get this thing going, rolling, just video, knock it out, and hopefully the end result will be a boosted car. But I hope you all are excited. I'm trying to keep this video brief, so let me know what all of you think. If you have any suggestions, just anything like that, just drop comments, help me out. If you enjoy the video, drop a like, but stay tuned. There's a bunch more to come, and until then.